Breaking news. Breaking news. Are you serious? Are you serious? Yes. 21 minutes ago, the Kremlin has just made a major announcement. Russia begins military withdrawal from Syria. Headlines. And of course, the one of their aircraft carriers and other ships will be the first to leave, says the military chief, in line with the reduction ordered by President Vladimir Putin. Matter of fact, Vladimir Putin has signaled mission semi-accomplished in Syria as Russia announces the start of its withdrawal of forces, beginning with the departure from the Mediterranean of a naval group led by the Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier. In accordance with this decision of the Supreme Commander of the Russian Armed Forces, President Vladimir Putin, the Russian Defense Ministry is beginning the reduction of the armed development to Syria. Armed deployment to Syria. They're going to start reduction. It's coming down. Matter of fact, expert opinions divided over whether this aircraft carrier's journey to the Mediterranean in October added anything militarily beyond a symbolic show of naval force. But Putin ordered a reduction in forces in Syria, coinciding with the start of a ceasefire brokered by Turkey and Russia. The fragile pact, which excludes ISIS and the al-Qaeda-linked Fatah al-Sham, is designed to pave a way for peace talks in Kyrgyzstan later this month, aimed at bringing an end to Syria's 6-year war. The Russian president previously announced a partial withdrawal of Russian forces, you may remember, in March of 2016, only to increase their presence again as fighting intensified. But it is likely this time around that Putin feels that his Syrian ally and counterpart, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, is militarily, if not politically, secured. Russia still has sufficient air defense capabilities with their S-300 and S-400 missile defense systems deployed in Syria, and Moscow has launched a bombing campaign in Syria back in September of 2015, helping to turn the tide in favor of Assad. We remember this, folks, because what happened was in September, and I remember I was in Dallas, Texas, getting ready to have a conference down there, when Putin announced one of his generals walked into the embassy of the United States and said, "You have 1 hour to get your planes out of the sky because Russia is invading Syria." And President Obama backed down and gave the airspace over to Russia. Now that when he did that, of course, the war began to turn the tide. And it also tells us in this article that according to official figures defying U.S. administration predictions that Moscow would become bogged down in the quagmire, Syrian regime forces targeting Aleppo were aided by Russian firepower on land in Syria and off the coast of the Mediterranean. Troops loyal to Bashar Assad finally ousted rebels from the city last month in their biggest victory in more than 5 years of fighting, paving the way for the Kremlin to launch a fresh push for a political solution to the conflict. Many rebel fighters and Western diplomats claimed it was Iranian-backed artillery as much as Russian air power in Syrian ground forces that made the regime's siege of Aleppo impossible to stop. And the ongoing presence of Iran-backed forces in Syria has led Turkey to warn that the Astana talks are in jeopardy. Fighting in Syria is set to continue, notably in the north and western province, but opposition fighters from Aleppo and other towns where sieges have been lifted have been sent to the province, and Assad's regime said on Thursday it was ready for an open battle with the opposition forces there as well. So what's happened is Russia has come in and has saved the day. America's troops backing down, of course, under Obama, giving way not only to the airspace, but to also the Mediterranean coast, allowing Russia and the Iranians to come in to side with Assad to push back ISIS and Al-Qaeda, or excuse me, the Free Syrian Army that was backed by the United States. Basically, Obama left the Free Syrian Army twisting in the wind. But remember, John McCain was the man that went to Syria and put his arms around them and said, I found the good guys, give these guys some guns. And that's what Obama did. He gave them guns, he gave them artillery, he gave them things to help them fight against Syria and create this ugly, ugly situation. It was Obama that started the whole Arab Spring in Tunisia, and then Egypt, Libya, Yemen, and ultimately Syria. Obama caused the Middle East madness. He did it by creating an Arab Spring and then pulling out of Iraq without leaving a base, but leaving the artillery, the tanks, the armored vehicles, the rocket launchers, $400 million in cold hard cash in one bank vault in Mosul, and allowing ISIS to form from all of these supplies. And then set back, in John Kerry's own words, watching ISIS decapitate and crucify and rape and execute innocent Christians and non-Muslims across Iraq and Syria. Let's just face it, that's what happened. Now Obama's going off into the sunset, and Trump is coming in, and Putin has decided this thing's about over. It's time for the Russians to go. Bigger fish to fry, bigger situations to deal with. What an ugly situation. Oh, by the way, thank you, Obama, because by creating this Arab Spring of insecurity, you've also created another thing called a migrant crisis, which is now overwhelming countries like Greece, France, Belgium, certainly Germany, and several nations across Europe. And thank you, Obama, for leaving the back door open in your visa program and your porous borders, because it's allowed a lot of very shady characters, even in this country, the United States of America. I'll be back with more current world events and how they relate to Bible prophecy. Certainly the Middle East is a mess. And now the energy is turning toward Israel and trying to forcibly divide that country in half, which will add just one more piece of chaos to the Middle East. We can thank Obama for that one also, by allowing the UN to pass a resolution in the UN Security Council, and now 70 nations will gather in France to figure out how to carve up Israel. Israel will not go quietly into the night. And so the madness of the Middle East will continue. I'll be back with more current world events and how they relate to biblical prophecy. The Bible says this is exactly what would happen, that all nations would come against Israel. They would touch the apple of God's eye, Zechariah chapter 2. They would come against Jerusalem, would become a cup of trembling and a burdensome stone unto all people, Zechariah chapter 12. Folks, it's happening. And there will even be an invasion of Israel. Zechariah 14. I'll be back with more in just a moment. Are you saved?